Okay, good evening. So let's start from traditional question about visual and audio signal. So do you hear me and do you see my screen? Okay, then let's start with homework. So I've got some feedback that and a lot of questions that seems too complex problem. So the problem is that I really needed to give a lot of information in on a previous lection in at one time because it's minimal setup to get it all working. And I understand that brings a lot of chaos, but now we will try to do this homework together, look at more examples, and then create an order from the chaos that has arisen earlier. So, okay, let me open this homework text. So what we needed to do? We needed to create two classes. So let's start from matrix 3. So that's 3. It's about a matrix not dimensions, so it will be matrix means two-dimension array. So this 3, it's only about a size. And we also needed to create an additional class, matrix launcher, so from where we will create these matrix instances and then launch the code. So here we will need this main function. So how do we create an object of given type? We are doing this that way. Just like before, when we created a zoo class, we could create a cat, for example. So we defined some class cat, and we could create an instance of this cat. So instance, that means object. So let it be the start. So we have defined class, so it just can be empty. Here we have instantiated this class. Now let's get back to this homework and let's read the first point. So create a class called matrix3 without main function that takes as constructor argument two-dimensional integer array. So let's get back here with cats and other animals. So do you remember here we have as a class state we had instance variables. So every cat has a name and every cat has an age. But here we do not created additional constructor. So what was the problem with that cat? So we could create that cat, so it's okay for now, but we needed to place additional 2 lines of code here to give an initial values. So if we not do it, these values would be default. So it would be null for string field and 0 for integer field. Previous time we have agreed that's not the best way. We had a better way to do it, to give this instance field values. So to do it via constructor. So anyway, we need to so when we are creating class, inside this class we can manipulate only with this this class doesn't know anything about callee class. So here we have a zoo with main function, and when we create a cat here, this cat from inside doesn't know anything about zoo class that where all the magic happens. So we need to have these class fields, and here inside functions we can access class fields. Well, you see here even idea highlights me this instance fields and function parameters. So anyway, we need to give values to that fields. So there are, let's say, three ways to do it. First, we can make these instance fields public, and we can assign values like this. But that's not the best option. Second option is to do it via constructor. So constructor, that's a special function that doesn't have return type and has absolutely 100% equal name to class name. So our class was called snake, and here it is. Is it reconnected now? So okay, so if it's that happens, please don't panic. So sometimes this happen. Uh, so okay, let's get back to constructor. So usual way of using constructors is to declare parameters that we need to initialize here at once, giving the same names as here, and then write these these lines of code. So assign values to instance fields from parameters. So this name, it's about our instance field. This name, even idea highlights here. So this is value from parameter. So now let's get back to our matrix. And so from this homework, we need to store a two-dimensional integer array. And so let's define this as class instance field. So public int so let it be our inner state of a class. So our class, it's about holding a matrix and some operations about it. So that's how we will store inner value. And now we need to write a constructor. So again, two ways to do it, to assign a value. So we could write down something like this to access inner field and say, okay, that's our new int with some values. Okay, if your screen is very blurry, so let me let me reconnect. So you will have a half minute downtime in stream, but I hope it will be better after this. So please don't turn off this stream. I hope it will reconnect after half a minute. Okay, do you see and hear me again? Okay, so that is the first way to initialize this inner state of our matrix 3 class. But that's not the best way. So today we will talk about these access modifiers, and usually we never have this public instance fields. So let's remove this. And here we have that takes as constructor argument two-dimensional integer array. So let's get back to our snake class and look how we have done it. So our snake had a name, so we had declared this inside as constructor argument and assigned this value inside constructor. So here we have instance field. Now let's declare constructor and let's declare a parameter. Now this matrix is equal to matrix. So by this line we're telling that our instance field with inner state with which we will work all the time now is equal to parameter given from outside. And now let's get back to matrix launcher. So now it's uncompilable because we have declared that we can create matrix 3 instance class object only when we are giving an array with initial state from beginning. So now let's declare this two-dimensional array from that was here inside example. New int, and let's give some values from here. 543 404 7 10 3. And now let's give this this array, this matrix inside our matrix 3 class object. So now we have passed this matrix inside this class. So now it will go here inside parameter, and here it will be assigned. So please, if it's not yet done or done in another way, please rewrite this example. So let's start from this class. So here that's a very important moment about instance field and constructor and parameter. When it is done, please say me. I will then switch back to matrix launcher. So that's important moment. We do not, when we write some complex and big applications, we need to divide this code into some small components. For example, like snake, cat, dog, and so on. These components that is technically defined here like classes. they should be not really big, so they should perform they should aggregate the state and behavior about only one well-defined, let's say, functional domain. So if we have a class cat, so it will contain a state and behavior only of a cat. In that way, we can split a very complex behavior inside smaller components. That is needed because if our application grows, it become impossible to understand all the parts of it in one moment. But if we have enough abstraction and everything is divided into some small defined components, it became much easier. So do you remember when we used this scanner? So it's just also a class here, class scanner and object scanner. So we have previously used this hard to get some input from a user. So so we do not need to know what's inside this scanner class, but we actually can use it. So we know how to use it. So it has some well-defined functions. So next int, next boolean, and so on that we can use. But we do not need to next, for example, next int. Yes. So I don't think that you have researched what's here inside this class. So this is not our class. That's built in Java class. So it has a lot of code inside, but I don't think that you have researched what's here inside. But this class, it can be used and it is usable. Exactly same scenario here. So we are defining a class that works with matrices with a size 3 on 3. So we will put a state and behavior inside, and here it is this technical ways to give a state, this initial state, and to create communication between components. So if we are creating instance of this class, we need to give initial state. So here it is our initial state. We have defined this once. And then we created, then we are creating instance of matrix3 class. And here we pass this state via constructor parameter. So is it now clear about constructor and how this instance fields is connected with constructor, and so how this data comes from outside inside this class? So the idea is that we are defining class once, so we have some inner state here. And now from outside we can create hundreds of instances of this class with different data, and we can use it in the same way. So is it now more or less clear? Or if not, please ask me a question, I will answer. So okay, reading material. Okay, I will look what can I do here, because uh, if you need qualitative material, you need to buy or steal a book. Uh, okay, but okay, let's look on our example with snake. So it is clear about these two parameters and these two fields. So about the book, I will research later. So I haven't read any book about Java. Not really, not only one about some special things in Java 8. So I haven't. No, I have read this certification book about 1,000 pages to prepare for certification, but that's not for beginner level. Okay, so let's look here on these parameters. So that was of type string and int. Here inside matrix, we still have parameter, but that's just a little bit different type. So here we can have any type of parameter. So here we can have two-dimensional integer array. We can have cat. We can have dog here. We can have scanner, for example. So these input parameters uh, can be of any type. So now we have so here we had two-dimensional integer array, and we can pass it through parameter if we define it that way. So the rule is that what type we have here, we should have here if we want to put the value of this parameter inside here. Okay, now let's the same type should be here if we are passing this as a parameter. So we will today we'll practice a lot with more classes and parameters. So I hope this will become more clear. Okay, about validation, let's talk about it a little bit later. Let's define our first function to print internal data. So here let's define function that prints our internal state. So it will be a void function because we do not expect any result, any return here. So that's just print. Let's call this function print self. And we do not expect here any parameters because everything that we need, it's our internal state. We already have it here. So we already know how to print two-dimensional array. So let's do it one more time. So that's how we print elements of this of each row, and then here we print additional new line. So you can just simply copy paste this from our previous examples where we have printed two-dimensional array. So here inside class we can access this inner state, and so we're using it to get rows, to get particular elements by indexes, and print them with spaces and new lines. So we already had this code before. that it's needed for printing. So please rewrite or copy paste and modify and tell me when it is done. We will get back into Matrix Launcher. Okay, I can show you in that way. So I can open at the same time two windows with code. So you could see both classes for now. Okay, how do we then we can call this function? So we're writing this file object name, then dot, and then function name with these brackets and semicolon. So now let's launch and see. Oops, I've got a mistake here. Let's print one more time. So here it is. So I gave this array as an initial value. So I have passed this inside constructor, and now it lives here inside matrix. Then, and now in functions I can do whatever I want with this inner array. So how I have splitted this. Okay, so here you can right click on some of these opened classes, and here it is split vertically button. So, and then you will could then you could have these two windows. But really, I do not use it in everyday life. So I can't. I don't think that's too useful. Just for now to show you two classes in one time. So now we have created this function print self, and here's one important moment about functions. So they are needed to first bonus of using them. It's that we can reuse the code. So I have declared function once, and then I can use it several times without copy pasting code more times, because later we will create a transpose matrix function, and then we will print this matrix one more time, and we could do it without copy pasting code. Uh, is it public? And here, do you have the correct name of instance. And here are all these curly braces are on the right positions. So it is really just a separate function. So without all the code, I cannot tell why it is red. So now let's continue. So we have created our first function, print self. Now let's go to the next function, calculate determinant. So here we will create a new function that's still public, and this one should return result of calculating determinant. So determinant is one number, one integer. So our return type will be int. And the name, let it be calculate determinant. So here again, we do not expect any parameters because everything necessary is already inside our matrix. So I don't want to write this once again. I'll just copy paste from previous homework. So I'll just perform a mass replace here. So you already had this code before. If you have performed this this homework. Now I have just moved it, copy pasted it here. And now with this result, what can we do? But not really can, but what should we do? We should return this result. We need to give it back here inside matrix launcher to the place from where this function was called. And when we say that we have a return type, something instead of void, we should use this return statement and just return this value that we have just calculated. So we have calculated this determinant, and now we are returning this. So how this looks like from outside? From outside, we are using the same object, and here's now our new function that's called calculate determinant. So we have defined function, we can use it now. And now, because this function returns some result, so here it is result now. So we can create here variable that will store result calculated here. We do not necessarily call this determinant. We can call it how do we want here. And now let's print it. So now please rewrite this function and this calling code. So you do not need to rewrite this if you have done this homework before. So you can just copy paste this and just perform this additional return. And say me when it is done. Okay, that's a good idea. So I have copied the code inside our Discord channel. So just to avoid this mass replacing it, because that can, if you are doing this manually, it can take a lot of time. Okay, it is at this point, is it clear with this function what it does and how do we get result here? So when I launch, here it is result. Okay, why we are using return? So this function, okay, let's imagine we have this void. Uh, we have calculated this determinant, but how can then we get this value from calling class? So yes, we have asked to calculate determinant. Okay, we have calculated it here. Here we have this variable that holds the value calculated. So we have performed a great work to calculate this. But the problem is that this code doesn't know what's happening inside this class. So, okay, it is calculated here, but this we cannot access this calculated value from here. So that's why this return is necessary. So this is the way how to pass calculated value back to this class. So this code doesn't know anything about this E, J, and so on. So the only things that this calling class knows about what is happening here, it's public fields and public functions. That's all. And actually, that's the only necessary. So we need to use this return statement to return back this value. Imagine a situation. Somebody you meet me on the street and ask me how much time it is now. If I use this void function, so I'm looking at my watch, getting know how much is a clock, but because function is a void type, I know the information, I know what time is now, but I don't. I remain silent and doesn't say it to you. So, well, that's not what you really expected. But if I define this function as I don't know, string or integer, so you are asking me about time. I somehow get this information about time and return it to you. So return the calculated value. Exactly like here. So now we can get this information calculated. So we can now this function returned value here, and now we can use it. When, for example, why do we have here inside print self we have void? So we do not return anything because that's not necessary. So we just need to print line some information and so inner state. So we do not need to return anything. But here we have calculated value and we need to return it. It is now clear about return and why it is necessary here. Okay, I think now it's a good idea to launch debug and look here step by step what is happening. Okay, now you see my debug is here on the left side. So I'm currently inside this matrix launcher class. So here in main function our execution starts and we have this defined array, two-dimensional array with all the values inside. So here I can see them. Var for 3, so here, and I can see them here. So currently this code exists, but there are no instances of this class. So this is just a blueprint of objects that can be created somewhere from outside. And now, what happens on the line 11? So we are creating a new class from this. We are creating a new object of this class. So here I am doing step into with this example. And look, where now am I now? I am now here inside this matrix 3 class. So this execution, how can I call it this? So executor switched from class matrix launcher to here, to this another class. So now we got into constructor. So when we're using new keyword, we are getting into constructor. So here it is. This matrix is still null because this is empty array, uninitialized, so its value is null. But here we have matrix and this matrix. So this is parameter and it contains values that we have passed here. So it is called in another way. So we can call parameters just like we want. So they should not be named the same as variables that are putting here inside. So here we have variable called example, but here this may be named absolutely different. So that doesn't mean anything. The main so the only thing that is necessary here is a type, so two-dimensional integer, and position between of parameters. Here we have the only parameter, and this type of parameter is the same. So here we have two-dimensional array, and we have it here. Now, after this line of code executes, so this matrix is equal to matrix that is a parameter. Now this matrix contains value. After that, this function is over, so this constructor have performed everything that's necessary, and we are getting back here. Now we have matrix 3 object with inner state. So, well, now you see here we have two arrays identical. So this our object matrix 3 now has its inner state with the same given array. So what we are doing next? We are calling function print self. Okay, let's go inside. So our execution sequence went here from matrix launcher to here to print self function that is written here. So that's actually how do we split the code across multiple files in our application. So this code should be familiar for you, so we do not cover what's happening here. So we will just print this matrix on a screen. So here it is printed. Now we are getting back. We have printed this inner state. And now another function, calculate determinant. So we are working still with the same object. Now I'm doing step into once again. And here I am calculating this determinant. So this code should be also familiar for you. So we have calculated this number. It is equal to something. And now we need to, so the most important part here is return statement. So we need to return this calculated value back to calling class. So I write return and the variable that contains value. Now I am back inside matrix launcher class, and here it is calculated value from here. Calculated value from here now lives here. So I have I have created a new variable and assigned calculated value from here inside this variable. So now this variable contains the calculated value. And now I have just printed this. So that is the basics. How can we split code between multiple classes, and how can we connect them? So how can we pass data from one class to another? And we also have the last one more function, transpose. But okay, let it now when we have created the base here with the matrix launcher and this matrix 3 classes. Okay, now let's this transpose function, let it still remain your homework. So you will need to create one more function here. This will change the state of this array. So you do not need additional matrix that to store here. So all the code that is written here will remain the same. So you will not need to modify it. Just one more function called transpose without any parameters, and you can call this function from here. And if you have read theory of matrices, then you should know that if you are transposing matrix 2 times, you will get the original matrix. So during transpose, we are changing rows and columns by their places. And so doing this one more time will give us the original. So that's the way how can you test this function working. So it is now clear what is happening here and here, and what do you need to do in a homework. So I mean in the next homework. Okay, if it's more clear, then so I'll put this code in a GitHub after election. Really, no sound? So it is. Do you hear me now or not? Okay. So okay, I'll put this in a GitHub, and your homework will be to write this last function and test it. So you can transpose this matrix 2 times, print self, and assume that and assert that it is the same as original. Okay, now let's continue with more examples, and let's create one more class that is called square equation. Okay, let it be with main function inside. Okay, if it is done, let me tell some words about static main and when do we need it and when we do not need this. So we can get back here with example of matrix launcher and matrix. So actually, we need to have this public static void main function only one in our application. So this function, it's like an entry point for Java virtual machine. So when you are launching Java application, that can consist of hundreds and even thousands of Java class files. But so Java virtual machine will search exactly this static void main function and starts its execution with the first line of this of what is written here. So it will execute only what is inside here. So it will not by itself create instances of some classes and execute this code. So this code will not be executed if not called from here or from other classes that was created here. So this is the root of application. So from here everything starts and here will be finished. So you can create class matrix 5 that will create class of matrix 3 inside and so on and so on. So you need only one main function inside your application. And so other classes that that are just created and used, they do not need this main function. And just because this main function just need to be declared at least in one class, we can sometimes use the same class to execute code. So I mean this. So here we can create instances of other classes that we have inside our own application. For example, I can create instance of class day of week or date validator or some Java built-in classes like scanner or random, and I can create the instance of the same class, and I can use it after. So, but unfortunately, I do not have here any state or behavior. So, well, I can't do anything with this class. So I cannot use it because it doesn't know how to do anything. Okay, now let's in this class let's remember our algebra lessons in a school. So do you remember how to calculate these square equations? Let me open. Let me write a comment here and let me copy paste this to Discord channel. So here it is example just to remember how we have calculated the square equation. So next we will create applications that get these coefficients before these coefficients that we will use as a user input. So user will input this 1, 3, and 4. And then we will calculate these roots of the square equation. So only thing that we do not know for now, it is how to calculate this square root. I will show you now. So double R is equal to So please rewrite this example with this new object creation and this square root calculation. And please give me a sign when you have rewritten this. So I'll show you more concepts about that. So more about static. So what does mean static? Static means that this function or instant field doesn't really belongs to enclosing class. So static means mm, so that's not that can live really outside of a class. So it doesn't need to for class to being instantiated to be used. Uh, let's get back to example of this blueprint of a boat and boat itself. So if you are trying to swim across a river with blueprint of boat, so this blueprint does not help you. But if you create boat, you can swim across it. Uh, when here inside Matrix Launcher, we have created object and used its functions. So we cannot use, uh, so we cannot ask a class to print self or to calculate determinant. So class itself doesn't. So you cannot use a blueprint of boat to swim. Exactly the same situation here. So we can use functions of an object, not of a class. But sometimes we can. When we define our functions, for example, static, why this can be needed? So that's when we can use functions of some classes without uh, creating instance of this class. Why this can be needed? So let's look inside this square root function. So this function is declared static, and this means that you do not need to create object of class mass to calculate this value. This might be useful when we are creating some classes that works just as utilities. So they are just calculating something and does not hold a value. So uh, this mass that's built in Java utility class that has a lot of mathematical functions. For example, here we have this absolute, tangencies, cotangencies, floor, sail, logarithms, and so on and so on. Square roots. So uh, here it is just utility class, and all functions of it are created static. So we do not need to create this object of class mass and then ask this object to calculate square root. So in this case, we are just uh, using this syntax. We're writing class name, not an object name, then dot, and calling a function. But please never use this static inside your application without a very, very special need. So you will not need it in your application so that you will write till the end of a course. So here I just show you the difference between using objects and using static classes. So for example here, so this class you will most probably use, and here I just explain you the syntax here. So we're not using the class itself because it's a special utility class with static functions inside. But here we will write absolutely normal, non-static functions that lives in a normal workflow. So now let's write some code that asks user for three coefficients, A, B, and C. So they will stand for coefficients that are used here inside our square equation. So if you see here x in power of 2 without number, so it's the same like 1 is multiplied by this. So here is coefficient 1. Now let's ask user for these three numbers. So you cannot write it with hands, you can just copy paste that code from previous examples. So these three, let's them be double. So not integers, but doubles. However, we will work with only integers, but it's better to use doubles here. Because anyway, we'll need to divide them and calculate square roots. So because our result can be a floating point number, let's origins be also a double. So when you are done here, please say me and we will go further. Okay, and now let's discuss about function that will calculate and print these roots of square equation. So please write down in chat how do you see this function declaration. So I mean this part. So this is called function signature. So access modifier, return type, name, and parameter list. So this is maybe called declaration, or more technically it's called signature. So just without implementation, just print down in chat how do you see this function declaration. Okay, the first answer, public int with return. So here's one more important moment about this return. So we can, in our case, we can calculate two roots, but we can return only one something. So we can, if our function returns int, we can return only one int. So multiple return types are not possible in Java. So there are some special languages where we can do such tricky things, but in Java we cannot do that. So of course there are some very special ways to uh, let's say wrap this return with some special classes, but not inside here. So we cannot use int with return here. So let's try one more time. Well, we will need if else's inside. So our function need to calculate and print the result. So if we are printing something, we actually most probably do not return anything. So this function will be a public void, and let's name it calculate roots. And here, so we have got these coefficients from a user, A, B, and C. So let's, so this function should get all the coefficients from user, and so everything inside here will be calculated on base of these coefficients. So let's declare them inside this function parameters. Yes, of course, it's outside main. So it's inside class square equation. And now we will call this function square equation, calculate roots, and here we will pass these parameters that we got from user. So here on a screen. So this is function that is inside class square equation. So as we discussed before, here we can inside main we can create an instance of enclosing class. So we should not all the time to create instances of another classes. We can create instance of the same class here. And here we have defined function inside our class calculate roots that we will call from main. Once we have created object of class square equation, we can here call this function. So please rewrite this function declaration and its call here from main. So also about main. So we cannot define functions inside functions. So each function should be absolutely separate from another functions. So when it is done, so you have a small practical assignment to implement this function. So here it is formulas. So I have copy pasted them in chat. So here it is how to calculate roots. So if x1 is equal to x2, it means that we have one root. And there may be a possibility when we have no roots. So calculate them and print them. So I give time till 8, and after 8 we have break till 2015. So if you do not so time till 8, and then let's have then I will continue. I hope we will need just 5 minutes to look on the solution, and then we will have a break. So for now, just please implement this function. So calculating this square root, we already know how to do it. So use this function mass.sqrt. So here inside you can pass not only immediate value, so you can pass here a variable. So it is clear about this assignment. What do we need here? Okay, so now let's stream continue. I'll just turn off sound and let's get back on 8 o'clock. Okay, let's check solutions. So first step in formula is to calculate a discriminant. So double D is equal to second B parameter, so that it's located here. To take it to calculate its power of 2, so we can multiply it by itself. So that is or in second power or multiply by itself. Minus 4 multiplied by A and C. So we can okay, we can take it into parentheses here. So and then if this discriminant, so we cannot calculate discriminant from negative number. So this one can be negative, and we, as you remember from a school course, we cannot get square root from negative number. So of course we have these imaginary numbers, but well, so maybe Java even know about them, but not in context of usual square root. So if this discriminant is less than 0, so we are just printing no roots. Okay, for these 4 lines of code is so please